Welcome back to another episode of the Sex and Spanglish podcast. I'm your hostess, Ana Lopez. I'm a sexologist and sex coach, and I'm here to help you change your relationship to sex so you can enjoy it sin vergüenza. Today, I'm going to be doing that by talking to you about what it's like living with endometriosis. Now, I know on the surface that that doesn't necessarily seem like it's related to sex, but because it is related to your reproductive organs, it is definitely related to sex, even if you are never planning on having children. Um, Most of you listening to this, or at least some of you, have a menstrual cycle. And it is very possible that some of you listening do have endometriosis. And as I always say, even things that are not directly related to sex are related to sex because sex doesn't live in a bubble. We have sex with our bodies. And so anything that happens to our bodies directly impacts our relationship to sex, directly impacts the type of sex that we are able to have, which then further impacts our relationship to sex. So, all of that to say is if this is your first episode that you're listening to, I promise you we do talk about things that are more directly related to sex, but this is a very important topic. And so, I encourage you to stick around. If this is the first episode that you're listening to, or you haven't listened to last week's episode, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to that first because today's episode is part two. So last week I talked about, my family history. And so talking about my mom, my grandmothers, my sisters, and their experience with their menstrual cycle and some symptoms that I see in them. Even though, um, most of them were never diagnosed with endometriosis. Um, and then I talk about my history and what it was like starting my period and the symptoms that I've identified, looking back, that definitely um, were an indication that I have endometriosis, even though I hadn't been diagnosed. So when I left off last week, I was talking about how I had this random cramp for years, and I still get it from time to time, actually. I don't know that I've had it since the surgery. Can't remember. I don't know that I have, but anyway, the point is, I had this cramp in the bottom right of my abdomen, and it wasn't like where my appendix is. It's more so like almost to my to my pelvis. It's like right above where like your leg bends. I have like this random cramp. And I don't remember how much in detail I went in last week, but very quickly, the point is, or to summarize, I had seen several doctors about this, and basically the general conclusion was that I have like basically like my intestines are like tender or maybe inflamed, and because of that, that when stool passes, then it like causes irritation. Um, and I was like, okay. And then there was another group of doctors that were like, well, it's like constipation. So it was basically something to do with that. And I was just like, okay, well, that's not really solving anything, but all right. So that's kind of where that was. And that was happening for years. And then the last time that I had that cramp is I just remember I was sitting down and all of a sudden I started getting that cramp again. And I was like, okay, I'm over this. I'm going to look for a doctor to who specializes in endometriosis, which is so fascinating to me looking back at that because I had never made the connection between the two, but that day I was just like, it has to be endometriosis. And I'm not sure why. I don't remember if I was on my period or if I was starting my period, but I was like, this has to be endometriosis. Um, so I got on ZocDoc, and which is, if you don't know, is a website where you can look up different medical professionals from dentists to psychiatrists to medical doctors to surgeons to specialists to even like dermatologists and all things like that. So, I think even I don't know if massage therapists are on there or not. Anyway, point is, I went on ZocDoc, I found my doctor, and again, I'm gonna go in detail a little bit later about what the process was like for like looking for the doctor and then selecting one to make an appointment with because I'm very particular about the doctors that I see. And I want to share what process I use to find any kind of doctor because this isn't just something that I use for this specific doctor. I do this for every single doctor that I want to see. So, again, that will be in a later episode. But let's start out by talking about my doctor's visit. So I made an appointment, and a few weeks later, I had my first doctor's visit where I met the doctor. We started out by going over why I was there in the first place, and I had shared my experience. If you listened last week, I shared my experience with the first doctor that I saw and how he was basically like an asshat and just wanted to give me birth control and was basically like, I don't want to operate on you. And I was like, well, I don't want you to operate on me anyway, and we kind of just left it at that. And then I had decided I wasn't going to pursue treatment until I had this cramp again. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to see another doctor just to see what they say. Because again, I wasn't sure if there was any negative repercussions for not getting treated. So I shared why I was there, and then I went over my medical history in detail. He asked me a bunch of different questions about my symptoms, and he even provided me with like examples of other symptoms that maybe I didn't mention. So I remember him bringing up pain with sex. He brought up chronic fatigue. And I was like, yeah, I have those and I know that I have those, but I didn't think to like bring those up. But so those are just two examples, but I shared all of my symptoms. He asked me about like other symptoms that I could potentially have. So we spent a ton of time talking about symptoms. And then he also went into a lot of detail of the symptoms. So for example, he said, do you have pain with sex? Which by the way is a green flag for a doctor. So he asked me if I had pain with sex. I said yes, sometimes. And he said, okay, when you have pain with sex, or how often do you have pain with sex? And I don't remember the percentage that I gave him because I was like, I am not good at estimating percentages here, but we kind of guessed. And then I said, so then he asked, okay, when you have sex and it's painful, where's the pain? Is it like internally? Is it externally? Where do you feel it? What does it feel like? Like getting really, really specific so that he had a full understanding of what I was going through, which is another green flag. The third green flag that he had, amongst many, was that he asked my partner if he had any questions. So my partner was in the room with me and he said, hey, do you have any questions? Is this your experience of, is what she's saying, like, is that everything? Or is there something else that you can think of that maybe you see that she's not seeing, or something that I've brought up that maybe she's downplaying, or maybe she's forgetting about or something like that, right? And so, like, checking in with him, not because he didn't believe me, but one, my partner also has sex with me. And so he kind of wanted to know from my partner's perspective, like, what is that? Like, what is your perspective on it, right? Not because like my partner knows the pain that I'm in, but because he's also there, right? And then I may forget things, right? And my partner, sees me and sees how I act. And I remember him asking, like, when she's on her period, like, do you notice a huge difference in like the way that she shows up, or like her energy or her symptoms and things like that? And my partner was able to share, what he sees, because it's a lot different of like what we share and what people around us see. Um, so that was another green flag. So then he went into potential treatment options, not from a place of you need to decide right now, but just sharing like, hey, these are the options. So he shared three options with me. One was do absolutely nothing. Two was to medically manage, so essentially being on birth control. Or three was to have surgery to remove the lesions and then medically manage, which would then be on birth control. And the reason for that, for surgery and medical management is because you're going to remove all of the lesions, but then you're also going to the birth control is supposed to help prevent lesions from coming back. So that was kind of like the idea behind that. So he shared those potential treatment options, and then he wanted to do a physical exam, which is something that every endometriosis specialist should do. FYI. So he he had me get undressed and he did an abdominal exam where he just like you may have had your gynecologist do this before, where he just pressed on my abdomen, wanted to see areas that were tender, and then he went in vaginally, so just like manually going around in like a clockwise manner, kind of pressing on different parts of my vaginal wall to see where I had pain, and he had me rate the pain. Once he did that, he had me get dressed, and then he came back in and he shared his thoughts based on the exam. And he said, based on what you've shared with me, um, the symptoms, your medical history, and the physical exam, I would like you to get an ultrasound. And I'm also going to tell you that even before the ultrasound, I can almost guarantee you, he's like, there's no way to confirm without going in. But he said, you have stage 3, if not stage 4. And remember, stage 4 is the most severe endometriosis. Um, And he said, the reason I'm so confident is because I've worked with, I don't know if he said hundreds or thousands of women at this point, that have this disease. And like you present as if you have 3 or 4. So I'm just letting you know. It's like, okay. So he scheduled me with the ultrasound tech that is on his team. And I went in a few days later and I had both an abdominal ultrasound and a transvaginal ultrasound. So she started with the abdominal ultrasound, which is just kind of like if you've ever had one or you've done one while you were pregnant, right? Just like rolling the little thing across your belly, taking pictures, not that big of a deal. The transvaginal ultrasound is like a probe that they put inside of your vagina and they take pictures. And so they did that. And I've had that done before, not really a big deal. But then um, she, they also did a manual exam at the same time. So after they were done taking pictures of my stomach and after they were done taking pictures like internally in the vagina, they then did like, she kept the probe in and she basically like pushed it against the vaginal walls and also pressed like physically on top. So she was like pressing from the inside with the probe and pressing from the outside with her fingers. Oh my God, it was so painful. She warned me. It was very, very painful. And that was like basically what she was doing with the ultrasound was looking for lesions, and also, pressing to see, like basically pressing on the areas where she thought lesions were. Um, so we did that. I went home and then I had a follow up visit the next week to talk about the results. So at that follow up visit, he again shared that yes, you have like stage 3, if not stage 4. But again, there's no way to confirm. He went over treatment options again. Oh, sorry. Let me rewind. So, at the very first visit that I saw him, he sent me home with homework. He said, I want you to educate yourself on endometriosis, even though um, news to him, I had already done so, which is why I was there. But he gave me information that is on his website talking about endometriosis, what it is, all of that, which to me was another green flag. One, him having telling me to educate myself on the topic. Of course, he gave me information while I was there, but he also encouraged me to become more informed about the disease and potential treatment options and all of that. And he also had the information readily available on his website. So I decided, to read his website or whatever. But then he also recommended that I get a second and third opinion. I wasn't going to do that because I was already confident based on the first visit and how it went with the ultrasound tech that I was definitely, I was very much considering the surgery, but if I was going to get the surgery, it was going to be with him. So I went over the treatment options. So fast forward, sorry, I feel like I'm all over the place here. So fast forward to the follow up. So at this point, I've had the initial visit, I've had the ultrasound, and we're going over the ultrasound results as well as potential treatment options. So again, he goes over the treatment options. He asks me if I have any questions about the information that I looked up. I didn't have any, but that was another green flag that he opened the floor for me to ask questions to clarify anything. So he um, told me once again, you can do nothing. You can get on birth control, or you can have the surgery and then get on birth control. He also asked me about pregnancy and about what that would mean for treatment. So he asked, like, are you planning on having children, like at all, or anytime soon? Because that is also going to determine, um, you know, what we should do in terms of treatment. And so I'm not going to go too much into the whole pregnancy thing just yet because I do want to talk about that in a future episode. And there's still some like things in the air. I still have to do another follow up and all of that. But I just want to share that the fact that he asked about that was a green flag as well. That he was, presenting me with options for treatment, right? Like what is available, but then also sharing like he wanted to know basically like my own health goals, right? And including pregnancy, if that was going to be a thing. And you know, if say I wanted to get pregnant right away, then his suggestion for treatment would have been one thing. Whereas if I was like, oh, I'm never planning on getting pregnant, it would have been something else, right? And like he shared like the differences and all of that. Um, so after our conversation, I decided to schedule the surgery. And again, the reason I decided to schedule the surgery right then and there was because I had already thought about this for over a year, maybe more. I don't remember when I saw the other doctor, but it was it was probably like a year and a half or so. And, you know, I had thought about this long and hard, and I knew that it like to me it made the most sense to do it. So I ultimately decided to schedule the surgery. I'll just quickly share my perspective. I don't know if I've shared it before, but from my perspective, and to be clear, I'm not saying this to sway anyone to get surgery or not. And if you're having trouble deciding, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about it, not as a way to sway you into having it or not, but I think it can be helpful to talk through a decision. But I had already made this decision, and my thought process was that the lesions are not supposed to be there, right? They're not like an organ that I was born with, right? They're not supposed to be there, right? There's to me, they were similar to like tumors or like cysts. Like they're not supposed to be there. So if my option for treatment, if I'm going to actually treat it instead of just doing nothing, if my option is to either get on birth control or have surgery and get on birth control, it makes more sense to have the surgery to remove the lesions first. Because remember, the birth control is management. You're not curing the disease with the birth control, you're managing it, right? You are basically maintaining where you are currently at. So I was either going to get on birth control, maintain the lesions that I already had, which were significant, by the way, or I was going to remove them and basically empezar desde cero in my mind, right? I'm going to be maintaining the empty, not the empty body, but like the body that doesn't have those lesions, right? That was my thought process, and I felt really good about that. Especially coming from a person that was like, I'm never in my life going under the knife, I'm never being put under, yada yada yada. I was like, it makes sense. And I was very, very confident in my decision. And I really think that that helped me in my prep for my surgery. It helped me in my anxiety levels for my surgery. It helped me in my recovery. I think that's why I've been able to uh, talk about it so much and not there wasn't a lot of like emotion attached to it. I've been able to, post here and there and, record these podcasts from my couch and things like that. And I think a lot of that had to do with how confident I was in the decision. I felt very empowered in the decision. Now, did I want to do it? Absolutely not. But I wanted to do it, if that makes sense. Like if I had the choice of being having the lesions removed without the surgery, I would absolutely just not do the surgery. But I wanted the lesions removed, and so I was confident in that decision, and I felt empowered making that decision. So, anyway, I decided to schedule the surgery. Oh, I did want to share a few other reasons why. So the lesions can become cancerous in the future. So lesions are typically benign, but they could be cancerous and they could also become cancerous in the future. I didn't want them there. If you do not get treated, they can cause kidney issues in the future. The lesions also cause inflammation in your body. And there's also a possibility that my symptoms are reduced. So maybe my chronic fatigue goes away or gets better. Maybe I have less pain, right? There's like a bunch of different things that can um, potentially get better by removing the lesions. Now, it's just a possibility, it's not for sure. But the reality is that, like, I'm cool with the possibility of that. You know what I mean? And it wasn't my only reason, but it was a bonus. Um, it also, having the surgery, excuse me, also gave me a baseline idea of how bad the endometriosis is because without having the surgery, we actually didn't know. There's no way of knowing. And so it gave me a baseline of how bad it actually is. And then the final reason, which I know is very much a privilege, is that I had met my deductible. So when I scheduled my surgery, I had already met my deductible for the year, which to me is wild because so my surgery was in July. So at some point before then, um, I guess in June, I had met my deductible. Like 6 months in the year, I had already met my deductible. I have no idea how that happened. I know I say this from a very privileged space of one, having insurance, and then two, also having met my deductible. But my surgery was only $500. And like, that's amazing. So to be clear, I would have done it either way, no matter if I owed, thousands of dollars because it was something that I wanted to do. And I also understand that that is a very privileged take. That said, um, I think it added more fuel to the fire, fuel to my decision, the fact that it was going to be so cheap, right? That's why I decided to do it when I decided to do it. So I want to go into how I knew my doctor was a good doctor. I did talk about a few green flags so far. And again, I am going to be talking about, the prep mode and all of that. But really quickly, I want to talk about how I knew my doctor was a good doctor. So first he acknowledged my partner, as I mentioned. He asked him questions. He made sure that he understood what was going on. He made sure that he was okay. So my partner gets really nervous in medical offices. And so if he looked really pale or, he looked anxious, he's like, he took it back a notch. He gave him some space, he checked in to make sure that he was okay. He he asked if he had any questions, like all of those things. He also gave me space to ask questions and made sure that I understood as the patient. He didn't pressure me to make a decision, but he did make recommendations based on my health goals, and he inquired about my health goals, right? Like, what is your goal with treatment? Like, what do you hope you accomplish with the treatment, right? He asked me about pregnancy. He asked me about sex. Um, he asked what I wanted out of treatment, right? What I was hoping to solve, like what were my end goals with the treatment. He encouraged I seek out a second or a third opinion. He gave me resources where I could go and educate myself and my partner on the disease. He also works out of his own practice so that he gets to decide what's best for his patients and not insurance. He gave me time or some like larger medical practice. He also gave me time to make a decision when I decided to schedule the surgery. He said, because I scheduled it that day in the office, and he's like, you absolutely do not have to schedule it today. He said, take your time. He's like, from my perspective, there's not a rush. He said, we don't have to schedule it right now. You can wait. It's entirely up to you. And I said, no, I absolutely want to schedule it now, um, because I had already made my decision. So that's what happened with that. And then he also encouraged pelvic floor therapy and pain coaching or therapy after the fact. So he's like, once you have the surgery, you're definitely going to want to see a pelvic floor therapist. You're going to want to get pain coaching or pain therapy to kind of rewire your brain so that you're not having that anticipatory pain. So I scheduled the surgery and I went into prep mode. And here are all the things that I did. And I actually shared some of this on a social media post probably a week or so after I had surgery. But in the event that you didn't see it, I want to share what I did. So I'm very much type A. I'm very much a planner. I like to be prepared. So I prepared an entire month worth of meals, ensuring that I had nutritious meals ready. I made sure that I was hydrated, and I also was started taking a fiber supplement, which technically I'm supposed to be taking every day anyway, but I had forgot, fell off the wagon. So I started doing that again. I made sure that I had comfy, loose clothing. So I'm always wearing like I work from home, right? So at home, I'm always wearing like sweats or, like loose, like pajama pants, things like that. But I made sure that I had enough that were like not super tight on my stomach because that's where my stitches were. Um, and, shirts that I would like t shirts that were comfortable to wear. I made sure that I had compression socks to avoid swelling and blood clots. Made sure I had pads on hand because after the surgery, I'm still actually on pelvic rest, which means nothing can go in the vagina. So that means for bleeding, you have to use pads. You can't use tampons or menstrual discs or cups. Of course, like no sex, anything like that. I Let's see. I gave my partner's number to folks who wanted to check in. So my partner was the one who took me to and from surgery, and he was the also the one caring for me for the first few days. So he gave so I gave my partner's number to like my sisters who wanted to check in and a couple of my friends, and that way that like they could check in on me instead of like having to go through me. Um, I also had my sister French braid my hair because I have curly hair. If you haven't seen my hair, I have curly hair and it gets tangled really easily. And I was not about to be washing my hair for the first few days. And I actually had to wash it the day before surgery anyway. So I just had her French braid it and I was able to have that in for like a week when I wasn't able to wash my hair. I made sure that the house was clean because I wanted to come home to a clean environment. Like my house isn't like dirty, right? Like, but I made sure that it was like I picked up any clutter. I wanted to make sure that I was able to move around easily. I also just wanted like it freshly cleaned, if that makes sense. I also made sure that the shower chair was cleaned and available where we could access it. So we actually bought a shower chair when my partner broke his shoulder, and which was super super helpful. And so we kept it because I knew that I was considering having no, actually I think when he stopped using that chair we were going to get rid of it, and then that's when I was kind of like seeking out help, and I was like, well, if I'm going to have the surgery I might as well keep it just in case. And it was actually really helpful because I was very tired from like standing and things like that, and so uh, it was really nice that we had that. I also coached myself. So I wanted to make sure that I was like mentally prepared to be off for a month. So I've been off. For those of you that don't know, I still have a full time job. And so I've been off next week. It'll be a month. I will hopefully be going back next week. But that was kind of like the biggest thing for me was being off for a month. And like, while that sounds nice, it's like I'm still very much working on learning how to rest. It has gotten a lot better. And I've talked about it before here on this podcast about resting. But I've noticed that that is still something that I need to work on of being okay to rest and actually having my rest be very effective. So that was one of the things that I had to coach myself on of like, you're going to be off, but you're also not going to be productive. And what does that look like and all of that? So I coached myself a lot on that. I also made sure that I had saltines and 7 Up on hand. I know that people typically drink ginger ale, but I think ginger ale tastes like shit. So I had 7 Up. And then I got things on the brat diet, which is bread. Specifically, it's supposed to be white bread, plain white bread, um, white rice, applesauce, and no, I take that back. The B is not for bread. The B is for bananas. So like yellow bananas, not like you don't want them like browning because they'll become too sweet. The idea with the brat diet, by the way, this is kind of like an aside, but the idea with the brat diet is that it's supposed to help soothe your stomach. So these are very like bland foods on purpose. So I had bananas, I had white rice, applesauce, and toast, which is it's supposed to be white toast. And then I saw my pelvic floor therapist. I made an appointment with her, and we went over exercises that I could do leading up to the surgery, and even exercises that I could start as I was able to move more. If I had to go through the surgery again, and I might actually, is unfortunately a thing that is possible, even though the surgery was a success. It is possible that I may, depending on how, um, things go, I may have to get them removed again, get more lesions removed in the future if they come back. So, um, I would do, if I had to do this again, I would do all of those things and I would prep foods, but I would prep them more bland. So I love chile, I love garlic. I yeah, I like flavorful foods and I realized that post surgery is probably not the best time for those things. Especially the first few weeks, I had heartburn so bad. I didn't realize that that was something that happens post surgery. I've never had a surgery before. So I would make some of the same foods probably, but it would be things that are more bland. So, for example, I made this like veggie soup, with I'm really obsessed with, but I made the mistake of adding in a ton of garlic. Which garlic is great for you, but also if you're having a lot of indigestion, it's not very, it's like high FODMAP. So I probably would have left the garlic out, and then I had also added red chili flakes. So I would have left that out. So yeah, I would cook foods that are um more, not even more bland, but like less spice, more mild, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Um, I would hydrate weeks before. So I did hydrate the week of, but from my perspective, hydration is something that you have to do over time. So, for example, if I'm dehydrated today, just drinking more water and getting more electrolytes in today isn't enough. Like it takes time to like build up that hydration. And so, from my perspective, it's something that I should have been doing for the weeks prior to make sure that I was like super hydrated. Um, I also would have, going along with hydration, is that I would have made sure that I was more regular moving up or leading up to the surgery. So, yes, I took that fiber supplement, but being more conscientious, no, conscious. What is the word I'm looking for? I would be more mindful of my fiber intake and really um attempting to become, as someone who is typically chronically constipated, to be more regular. I would also add an extra rest the weeks before. So rather than trying to do all the things leading up, I would have kind of like cleared my schedule to allow my nervous system to rest, to really like allow my body to rest leading into that. And while that seems kind of may seem kind of odd because you're like, okay, well, you're going to have surgery and then you're going to rest while you're having surgery. It's like, yeah, but you don't want to go into surgery, something that is very harsh on the body, even if it's something that needs to be done. You you don't want to go into surgery like in fight or flight mode. You don't want to go, just like you don't want to go into surgery like being sick or having an infection, right? Like you want to go in as healthy as you can be, right? And so resting before allows you to kind of go into that surgery um, from a better place. Like if you've ever played sports, right? You don't like stay up and do an all-nighter the night before like a championship game or before any game, right? Like you're like resting, you're eating well, right? And so in the same way I would have rested weeks before, I would have also cleaned up my diet. I said I was going to do this and I did it somewhat, but I think I would have been a lot more rigid with what I ate leading up to, because again, I want to prepare my body and support my body going into surgery. Just like you're going to prepare what you eat before you run a marathon or before you go to like the championship basketball game or whatever the hell it is, right? Like you want to be sure that you're supporting your body for what it's going to go through. I would have also taken the medication as prescribed for the first few weeks, even though I felt I didn't need it. So I stopped taking pain meds pretty early on. I paid for it, note taken. And the last thing I would do is walk more. I started out really strong by walking, and I think I took it a little too far. And then I was scared to walk. And since then, I haven't walked as much. And so I'm trying, but yeah, it's been a struggle, but I would have walked more. So, um, last two things. I want to talk about if symptoms will resolve, and I also want to talk about what happens next. So, will symptoms resolve? There's actually no way of knowing. It can take about 4-ish weeks for inflammation to go down, and I'm currently 3 weeks post-op. What date are we on? 28. Okay, so yeah, I'm about 3-ish, oh, almost 4 weeks post-op. Um, so we'll see. I feel okay right now. I'm still a little bit tired, but again, I'm still recovering. And contrary to popular belief, it does take a while just because I'm going to be able to go back to work soon, even though I'm able to drive now and, do more things. That doesn't mean that my body isn't still recovering. Just because you are back to doing what you used to be able to do, like prior to being sick or prior to a surgery, your body is still recovering, even though you don't see it. So I really want to remind you of that because I see this so often with my clients who are like coming back from being sick, for example. It's a really common thing. They're like, oh, well, I was sick last week. And then now I'm trying to do all of these things. And I'm like, girl, like you're feeling better, but your body is still recovering, right? Like, it's like if you were in debt, right? So it's like let's say you're like, I don't know, $20,000 in debt and you paid off all of the debt, like you've been paying it off and now you've paid it all off. Okay, great. You paid off all your debt. Wonderful. But now you have to work on building up your savings. You have to work on building up like your checking account, right? Like all of this extra money that you had was going to paying off the debt. So you were in the negative and now you're at zero. So now you got to work up to the positive. And so, in the same way, like if you're sick or if you're, having a surgery or, something like that, you're in the negative. And now that I'm like mostly recovered, right? I'm going back to zero. That's going to take me a while to get back to the positive. I'm still having pain, but it's a different pain, and I have no idea, no way of knowing what's to come. Um, I'm having more of like nerve pain, and they did give me a medication for nerve pain, but it makes me extremely groggy. And if I take that, I don't feel comfortable driving, even if I take it like right now, I'm recording this late at night. Um, if I were to take it tonight, I wouldn't feel comfortable driving tomorrow, and I have a doctor's appointment in the morning. So I won't be taking it. Well, also, thankfully, right now I'm not in pain. But yeah, I've been having nerve pain, which is interesting. Um, I uh, may experience some reduction in symptoms and maybe not. Um, but again, this wasn't my deciding factor in getting operated on. I knew that going in that um, I could have a reduction in symptoms or not. And that was just that wasn't my deciding factor going in. So I want to really quickly talk about my follow up visit experience. So I've had one follow up visit since my surgery, and it was like a few days afterwards. They checked my stitches. They asked how I was doing and how things were going. They showed me pictures of what was inside of me and everything they removed, which was wild. There was so much stuff in there. I'm so glad that I got the surgery done. They found a cyst. They said that everything tested to be endometriosis. So there's that. The cyst was benign. They also shared some additional issues that I have that I'm going to discuss with them in my next follow-up. They really just wanted to focus on, in the initial post-op visit, they really wanted to focus on like the surgery and the initial recovery and all of that. So in my next follow-up visit, which is in a week, I believe, we're going to be going over, what the other additional issues they found. So I will be doing a part three once that's done and over with, and I have more information about what that's going to look like moving forward. I will definitely be coming out with that episode. So what now? Um, I will have my follow-up visit soon in a week from this recording. That said, part three probably won't come out for maybe like a month or so, depending on what is shared in the follow-up episode. The follow-up visit, because I do want to give myself time to process and to make decisions and educate myself and all of those things. But once I have that information, I will definitely be recording a part three. Um, so, um, where are we at now? I do want to share that in the show notes, I have the link for the Endometriosis Foundation of America. So definitely go and check that out. I will also leave in the show notes the link to ZocDoc. It is not, I think there's affiliate links, but this is not an affiliate link. It's just the regular website where you can go and check out and find a professional. Again, be on the lookout for that episode about my process about finding a doctor. And really quickly, before I let you go, I want to let you know that I am now taking on one clients in textual healing, which is my one coaching program. So if you are interested in working with me one, now is the time to do so. Go ahead and go to the show notes. The link is in my bio, and I will talk to y'all next week. Bye.